Oi, oi, hello and welcome to another GG.CO.UK trends video. We have just seen a very good renewal of the British Grand National. Willie Mullins' domination. Lovely to see his son riding the Grand National winner and how much that meant to the family. We're now moving on to the Scottish Grand National. This weekend in Ayr, there is some real good racing, and with Willie Mullins' success at Aintree this weekend, he's on to win another Trainers' Championship, which means we are being spoilt at some of these late season fixtures. He's got an abundance of runners in the Scottish Grand National itself. He has one horse that qualifies off of the trends that I'm about to talk you through in this video. There's another horse, Chosen Witness, who's been significantly well supported since entries were confirmed yesterday, midday. So this is being recorded on Tuesday, around about 4:30. I'm recording this at the moment. I'm going to run you through the quick trends. Now, as always, there's a link in the description if you want to go and dive a little bit deeper in there. It's difficult with some races to profile, I guess, the type of the winner. There are other races where it can be a little bit more straightforward, but sometimes it can give you a little bit of an in or an out if you've got maybe questions or concerns about a type of horse. You may have decided, I like this horse, but is it a negative if X, Y, or Z happens? Just something off the top of my head from the Grand National last time. I talked about it in the last one, that it was interesting with jockey bookings that it's been profitable more recently to have a jockey that's ridden a horse in the Grand National that hasn't actually won on the horse, rather than it being a first-time jockey on there or a jockey who has a previous success on that horse. Now, there are a multitude of boxes that potentially need to be ticked if you're looking at every single one of the trends. But a horse like the winner of this year's Grand National, Nick Rocket, was ridden by Patrick Mullins. He'd ridden the horse once before and not won on him, goes in here, goes and wins a race. So I just mean, if you were to look at a horse like that one and then look at the jockey booking and think to yourself, well, is that a negative? I know from yard perspective, in terms of the pecking order, you would say, well, it's not the first string, clearly. But if you were to look at it from a stats perspective or from the trends that I've peeled up for some of these races, sometimes you might be able to say, well, actually, that doesn't seem to make as much of a difference. Or potentially in this instance, because the positive return on investment that's in there, which has now been boosted even further by Nick Rocket, you may actually say it's a positive. So look, that's not after time in saying that it's in there. Of course, I'm going to tell you the horses in this instance which do tick all the boxes. I try and do that for as many of the trends videos as we do, but sometimes we do the trends videos before the entries are out. In this instance, we've got the Scottish Grand National. So look, I'm going to put down the bottom the key trends that I've highlighted in the article. Go and have a look at that if you're that way inclined. Like I say, it can help with decision making. But the two that tick all the boxes, which again, sometimes you can have so many horses that tick the boxes where you want to delve into it a little bit deeper, that you could add weight into it. You could say some trends are more prominent than others, but again, it's probably better to be done as personal perspective. But the two that tick all the boxes are O'Moore Park for that man, Willie Mullins, and Apple Away. Now, I say they tick all of the boxes. There's a ratings and a weight band, so weight carrying band, that I'll talk about in here. The ratings band is the first figure that I would use, and then I would look at the weight band. In the ratings band, there are horses that don't at the moment currently fit into the weight band. So there's no horses that tick both those boxes. But it is a case of, we've got a horse that's quite high up in the weights. The second in's £2 lower. The third horse is £6 lower than the top one. So there is scope that if the top three didn't actually run, that some horses' weights would fall into those bands, which would tick the box even bigger. But I don't think that's going to happen in this instance. It's not so relevant. So yeah, O'Moore Park for Willie Mullins and Apple Away for Lucinda Russell. Now, probably of those two, again, you can add depth into wherever you want. My personal preference of those two would be for Apple Away. Apple Away has won at this racetrack. We'll talk about that, like how it pans out, whether you've run at this track and whether you've actually won it or not. But the big thing is the fact that the horse has run over extreme trips. Admittedly, last month in the Midlands Grand National, she didn't do very well. She didn't jump very well. She did pull up in that race, but she was sent off a 9-2 shot for a stamina test like a Grand National is. And we've seen her in the past as well. Like, she's been well fancied for staying chases. Now, look, she hasn't quite put it all together to go and get her head in front, but she's got some reasonable form in there. So like I say, of the trendy ones, she'd be at the top of the tree. But look, we've gone 4 minutes in, haven't even peeled you out a trend yet, but we will do that right now. So the first trend is aged between 7 and 11 years old, but preferably no older than 9. That was very similar to the Grand National one. I think it's actually, in fact, the same in the fact that you can be aged between 7 and 11, which would cover the entire field. Like, you wouldn't rule any horse out if you're being like Not so harsh, but if you want to be harsh, looking at recent trends, I think 7 of the last 8 winners have been aged 9 or younger. So you probably want to look for a horse that is 9 or younger. Trend 2 is horses that are priced 14 to 1 or bigger, or are the first 2 in the betting. So this is all done, these figures are worked out at SP. So a horse could be 20 to 1 now, could get backed into 12 to 1, and that might actually make it no longer tick the box. But it is interesting that I think 9 of the last 10 winners were either the first or second favourite, or they were priced 14 to 1 or bigger. So I guess those ones that are third, fourth, maybe fifth in the betting, that are sitting under 14 to 1, but aren't quite as prominent enough as the first 2 in the betting, you can actually rule quite a few horses out on that. As it stands at the moment, Bofo, Moore Park and Apple Away would tick that plus 14 to 1 box, but as I say, it's worked out on SP, so you'd have to see how that figures out at the end. Trend 3, I touched on this a bit with the weight carried, is rated between 135 and 146 and carrying 10 stone to 10 stone 7. Now, individually, I put the details of what they come in there. If you backed all runners rated between 135 and 146, you'd be showing £37 profit this decade, or just under, and a £56 profit this century, or again, just under. If you combine both those measures, so the weight carried and the official rating, you found 9 winners this century with a 50% return on investment to SP, and there was 5 winners found from the last 10, and that's for 125% return on investment, again, to SP alone. Both those return on investments do increase massively if using Betfair, but like I say, from the official rating band, that is profitable to back blind on its own. As I say, link in the description, you can go check it out if you want to read a bit more detail. Last ran between 16 and 30 days ago. This has been a profit maker across both periods. It's not even really the case that most horses fill that box. Most horses actually fill a box from running more than 30 days ago. Now, there are a number of horses that ran 32 days ago. Some years that race schedule would have fitted in to being under 30 days ago. So look, where I put these windows in there, if you want to edge it out a tiny bit to suit your narrative, then do that. If you want to tweak the rating band or anything like that, but it obviously doesn't prove as profitable as what's suggested in here. So again, there's only 2 horses that fill that window. When I start to whittle things down, which are again a Moore Park and Apple Away, with the other boxes ticked prior, but there are a number of horses that were on 32 days as their last run. So again, you may potentially want to be forgiving of those. Last time out winners are respected, but didn't really help out in this instance. Has not necessarily run at air, but has won there if doing so. So it's not important to have run at air. Essentially, a horse can be having their first look at the track and you wouldn't see that as a negative. However, if a horse has run at air, you would expect them to have won, or you would hope that they would have won. So I think that's almost a fairly obvious statement to make when you say it like that, but ultimately you can whittle horses down based on that, and it works out that it pays dividends in the long run. And Trend 7, they have run 5 to 6 times this season. That is profitable, and that is almost without exception. Even runs in the last 365 days. I think every winner for this century, definitely for the last 10, but maybe for this century too, had 5 to 6 runs in the last 365 days, as well as the 5 to 6 runs this season. So like those 2 almost fall in line with the time of year that this is, and the season turning over when it gets through into May. Like, you wouldn't expect many horses to run here, then run again after this before the start of next season. But 5 to 6 runs is definitely a crucial element for box ticking in here. So that's all the trends for the Scottish Grand National. As I say, it's going to be proper good racing this weekend with Willie Mullins mounting his charge. I'm looking forward to it. We'll be back with a weekend watch on Thursday. So tune in there to find out what our selections are for the ITV racing and potentially anything from anywhere else. Thank you guys so much for your support. Make sure you're dropping a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you can and you want to do that. And we will see you again very soon.